Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navic's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navic.co. This episode is brought to you by Overwolf. With over 1,500 games supported, 165,000 creators, and 38 million monthly active users, Overwolf is the guild for in-game creators. Whether you're a gamer, creator, or game studio, Overwolf is the ultimate destination for integrating UGC in games. For game studios, Overwolf offers CurseForge for studios, a white label solution that lets game makers and publishers easily integrate mods safely and seamlessly into their games, both existing and new, at zero cost. It's battle-tested by AAA studios and games, including Maxis with The Sims 4, Studio Wildcard with Arc, Take-Two Interactive, and others. For creators, Overwolf is the all-in-one platform that enables creators to build, distribute, and monetize in-game apps, mods, and game servers. In 2022, Overwolf paid over $160 million to in-game creators, proving that they truly value the talents and contributions of the gaming community. You can check out everything Overwolf has to offer at overwolf.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
All right. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and this is the Interview and Insight segment. One of our missions in 2025 is to bring you more content from the Asia gaming market, operators, leaders, and investors that are boots on the ground in a market that's often misunderstood and kind of a hard nut to crack from the perspective of the West. And earlier this year, I sat down with the ex-CSO of NCSoft to discuss the company's origins and strategic plans for 2025, as well as critical market trends in the Korean gaming scene. And today we'll be getting a different perspective on that same market from a different vantage point of another Korean gaming giant, Com2Us. So Com2Us has a long and storied history in games and entertainment. Founded in 1998, Com2Us was a mobile games first company from the get-go. In 2014, they launched their most famous title, Summoner's War Sky Arena, a billion-dollar franchise with over 200 million plus downloads that spawned multiple more titles. And more recently, Com2Us partnered with Skybound to create a mobile game for the Walking Dead series, has invested in multiple media and gaming companies over the past 5 years, including KR gaming conglomerates like Div Sisters, most famous for Cookie Run, and they've also made various metaverse and blockchain bets, albeit some are trending more successfully than others. And so today we'll be talking about the history of Com2Us, global live ops, the importance of Western IP, and starting a venture arm, and more. And so with that, I am super excited to welcome my guest and topic expert today, Kyu Lee. Kyu is the Chief Business Development Officer at Com2Us Corporation, where he's overseeing licensing relationships with many well-known Western sports IP, such as Major League Baseball and the NBA. I'll give some more background in a moment, but Kyu, it's such an honor to have you on air. Welcome. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from home. Nice to meet you, Alex.
Nice. At home for you is
it's in Palos Verdes, California. So
okay.
It's south of LAX, it's part of LA County. Our office is located in Hollywood, but since it's pretty far to commute, I only go there several times a day.
Makes sense. And yes, as someone who's also lived in LA for a couple years, totally understand going 4 miles in Santa Monica in California can take 2 hours. But I'm really excited to have you on air. And before we talk about the meatier topics, I want to spend some time talking about you and your history at Com2Us. It's pretty rare for us to get folks who have such long tenures at companies. And you are an expert on Com2Us's origins and obviously future strategic direction. So spare me some airtime here, but I'm going to give you a brief overview because you've just done so much. So you've been at Com2Us before Com2Us, actually, beginning your career at Gamevil, which most people today would know as Com2Us Holdings. You've been there for 20 years, first as the president of Com2Us USA, where you led the incorporation of Gamevil USA and Com2Us. And we're definitely going to talk about that period a bit more in our show. But during this time, you spearheaded billion-dollar franchises like Summoner's War and MLB 9 Innings. You secured licensing deals, like I mentioned before. You do some strategic investments like iBound, blockchain companies like Animoca. You raised $40 million for a blockchain platform. You're also a big part of starting Crit Ventures, which is the CVC arm of Com2Us for our audience that might not be familiar. And you've just done so much at this company. And as I was preparing for this show, it was kind of hard for me to know where to start. So tell me, like, what are your biggest 3 chapters that Com2Us? Like,
on a personal level or on a corporate level? So, yeah.
maybe both, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can give you some background about about the company and myself. Come to us was originally called Gamevil. Come2Us Holdings was originally called Gamevil. Gamevil actually started in 2000. Come2Us, which was our biggest rival in the South Korean market, they started in 1998. The original CEO, founder was her name was Ji-young Park. And so we were distributing like old feature phone games to the carriers, SK Telecom, KTF, and LG Telecom in South Korea. And we also expanded to the West around the same time in 2006. And I think both companies were going through their up and downs for quite a long time until the App Store really came around, and our revenues started growing significantly because we weren't distributing our titles only to 1 or 2 countries. Now we're distributed to 150 countries through the App Store, and I think at that point, there were a lot of M&A discussions in the market, and we decided, what if we just merged together? So what happened was Gameville actually bought Come2Us, and then later on changed our name to Com2Us Holdings. So both companies were public already. So right now, the company's traded under Come2Us Holdings and Come2Us. So there's 2 tickers in the South Korean market. Myself, the founder of Gameville, his name was Byung-jun Song, James Song. He was 1 year senior to me, and we've known each other since high school. High school, we went to Seoul National University, same college. And one day he just said, like, I'm starting a company. So, and my major was physics, and I always
wow.
wanted to go into the computer science field. And so I was doing a lot of programming back then. And so I decided, before, like, maybe I was planning to go to the US for graduate school, but then I wanted to check what he was check out what he was doing, and so I started as a backend engineer for the company. So I did database management. I also created a lot of web pages back then. I created an avatar system for the company. We were doing online PC gaming too. So before 2004, we were doing online PC gaming and mobile. And at 2004, um, the founder, James Song, he made a big decision to go in 100% to mobile gaming. And like, if you think about it, it was a really big bet because we were still 4 years before the App Store came around. And but also in Korea, there were a lot of giants that were growing significantly online, like NCSoft and Nexon. But we thought the future is going to be in your hands, so we decided to focus on mobile. So I think that was a significant pivot point for the company. Absolutely, when the App Store came around, our revenues jumped significantly. That was another huge pivot point. We were doing, if you remember, in the early days of the App Store, we were servicing standalone games, so it wasn't really games as a service. And so we were selling the game, I think, at like $19.99, and then $9.99, $5.99, 99 cents, and then it became free to play. And when we turned free to play, I think that was a huge pivot point for our company too, because our organization was not optimized to do live operations. But luckily, there were a lot of South Korean companies who were doing live operations on PC gaming. So we hired a lot of senior executives at that point for us to transition our company into a service game company versus being a product-based company. So I think that was a huge pivot point. Obviously, the acquisition of Com2Us was huge too. And after we acquired Com2Us, Summoner's War was born, and so we were still doing very well back then. So we had a lot of #1 titles on the App Store, like Baseball Superstars, Zenonia, Cartoon Wars, Air Penguin. There are a lot of games that hit the #1 spot on the App Store. App Store, but I think Summoner's War was a completely different monster. Yeah, so I can't believe that it's already been 10 years since the game has been serviced. The game has generated more than $3 billion in revenue, still averaging about $1 million per day. So yes, it's been a huge blessing that we got to create and operate this type of game.
Yeah, and I'm super excited actually in our next topic, we'll dive into a little bit about how Com2Us made Summoner's War a very successful global title. But it's a very storied history, and it sounds like there's some critical, inflection points. Gamevil acquiring Com2Us and Com2Us going more, or the mobile space going more free to play from even the premium mobile market, and the release of Summoner's War itself. But I have a question for you that I've just been super curious about. It's my understanding that, as you said, Gamevil acquired Com2Us, right? And usually the acquirer puts their name on top of the subsidiary.
Right.
And in this situation, you guys actually changed Gamevil into Com2Us Holdings in 2021.
Right.
I guess I'm just curious, like, what's the why not rename the subsidiary?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this information has ever gone public, but yeah. So when we bought Com2Us, Com2Us was already a public company. The owner owned around 30% of the company, and we bought their shares. So we were the largest single majority shareholder, but we weren't like we weren't. Yeah. So we were in control of the company, but also, the company also itself also had its own culture, so it wasn't like
Sure.
100% acquisition. And we also were very careful to support the culture that Com2Us already had. And we wanted to honor that. And then Summoner's War was born. And Summoner's War was born under the Com2Us brand.
Right.
And long story short, I think the Com2Us brand became more popular or recognized than the Gamevil brand. And so I think it was very hard decision. And I don't exactly know what was going on in our chairman's head when he had to make that decision, but it was a hard decision, but I think it was a very honorable decision to respect the culture of the company that we acquired, and also respect the people who are working for that brand.
Yeah, I think it's pretty incredible actually, because it is always so often the reverse. And I guess I would have suspected that a lot of it also has to do with the brand recognition. I mean, you don't want to throw out the intangible asset of the Com2Us brand that published Summoner's War, which is what consumers are familiar with, versus this potentially unknown acquirer. But I thought it would be interesting to tap into your perspective there. And I guess in similar to that vein, and I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to retroactively just refer to Gamevil as Com2Us Holdings, even though the name has changed.
Fine.
But so
it's already confusing.
It's already confusing. So Com2Us Holdings, back in 2006, begins to expand into the US, right? And so you're at
Right.
this period where you're doing mobile gaming first, and I want to ask a question about like what was happening internally that kind of inspired that geographic expansion.
Yes. So in, back so I started out as a backend engineer, and our company shifted its position to focus only on mobile in 2004. And as we were growing, like we were servicing our games to the South Korean market, but internationally we weren't doing anything. So we decided, but we started partnering with a lot of companies back in the days. So I'm not sure if you remember Jamda, which became EA,
Yes.
and then there was Hands-On Mobile, Informa. And there are a lot of that we also published our games through. So we had some baseball games back in the days called CBS Sportsline Baseball. We created Barry Bonds Home Run History. We had um, a game that was distributed through a publisher called iPlay called Skipping Stone. It actually won the IGN Mobile Game of the Year award. It was a single button mashing game on the mobile feature phone. So we were doing those type of publishing, and the carriers were the gatekeepers there. So they got to choose which games they were going to publish, and we were a developer, and we were relying on publishers that were in the US, and the publishers had so many games that they were also publishing, and so
Mhm.
we would so often pitch titles to the publishers back in the days, and yeah, a lot of times those titles would never get published. So we decided we have to build relationships directly with the carriers, at
Ah,
least to publish more games is what came across our minds. And I was probably the best English speaking person at that time at our company. So, and I said I wanted to do overseas business development, so I was doing all of those partner deals, and then I decided to open the office in 2006.
I see. Okay,
So
got it. So a mixture of actually, so you, in a way, a little bit of kind of frustration with the ability to break into and distribute in the U.S. market directly with the telcos.
Ab absolutely, but, also the telcos were limiting the amount of, partners that they had, so it was a hard job, but eventually, we got to sign with about 10 different telcos in the
Mm,
US, and we started publishing titles, um, more than before, but it wasn't easy because we had to, um, not only create games but also test against 100 devices that we didn't have. So buying devices was a huge part of the work. Testing against those devices was another part of the work.
mm,
And when Apple came around, that actually solved all of the distribution problems and the device testing problems and the selective publishing problems that we had. So it was a it was a it was truly a game changer and game
mm,
changing moment at that time.
mm. I guess what you mentioned that you were a very good English speaker, so it sounds like you were just nominated to do this, to play this role. But what was it like? I think being at the center of a large scale international expansion of a company. You headquartered in the U.S. for the first time. You're working actively on hiring GMs for European offices. What is I guess if you had to tell our audience, like what are like one or two critical lessons to learn there? It seems like such an enormous task. I guess how did you think about it?
Yeah, I think. Well, we had a big picture, and I think breaking those down into smaller steps were hard, but and and I didn't have all the best relationships in the industry too, so I, I had to hire a lot of good people to build those type of relationships. That was one of the things that I was focused on doing. Um, and eventually, well, I just have to be present, just like we were just talking about, like going to Dice, but I had to go to every single conference and then make sure that I'm visible there. One of the interesting things that I think I did back then was I created a Korean mobile gaming newsletter. So I would just throw like hundreds of people in the email thread and just blast out presentations on what's going on in Korea. So I think people recognized who Gamevil was, at least in the industry. And since I was at the conferences too, and I think that eventually led to the carriers being aware of us, and then also enabling to sign contracts with us.
Awesome.
But that was an interesting thing. And then talking about international expansion, US was our first international office. And then for Europe, I had to hire a good person. But I think Europe was very strategic in our operation because, so if you think about what the App Store does, it distributes the game to 150 countries, but it doesn't do live operations to 150 different countries. And we identified around 14 different languages that were important to us. So for Europe, our office in Berlin, they were covering six different the EFIGs and Russian language out of Europe. So after we hired the GM David, which is still with us, which he's still with us, he actually hired all of the localization people required. Southeast Asia, our approach was a little bit different. We saw that the feature phone business was dying and the smartphone business was picking up. So we reached out to one of these feature phone gaming companies who were doing mobile WAP services in Southeast Asia in like 6 different countries. And we told them, like, you're going to go out of business pretty soon. And I think it's more important for you to align yourselves with the next generation of smartphone gaming. So we convinced the founder to sell the company to us, and we automatically had 6 different offices in Southeast Asia. And then we hired people to do set up our Japan office. We hired a person to set up our Chinese office and also our Taiwanese office. So right now we have more than 10 offices around the world, and that is the live operation layer that we built on top of the App Store. And I think without this type of service layer that we created, like a truly global hit wouldn't have been created. And I think that was one of the reasons why when a good game like Summoner's War came around, we were ready to push it out globally.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And honestly, like, this is a perfect segue into, the next topic, which is about Com2Us and live ops and mobile distribution trends. And actually, before we go to speaking about, why Com2Us succeeded in making a global title, which often, a lot of South Korean gaming companies have sometimes struggled to do. I actually want to talk a little bit about what your perspective is on mobile today. As you said, Com2Us is mobile first, but mobile has been struggling kind of across the globe. Ongoing changes to mobile monetization, ATT has put mobile gaming companies in the West in a pretty hard position. And so, do you think mobile is as attractive as it was 5 years ago to Com2Us, given some of these headwinds that the App Store has actually put on the space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think mobile is still the biggest market globally. It's in every single person's hand. I think we're kind of we're so used to the massive amount of growth that we were experiencing year over year, that and now we're at a phase where almost everybody has a mobile device, and probably so the amount of growth that we're seeing aren't as big. Also, if you look at the devices were have it was so much more inferior compared to the PCs back then. But year over year, like now, I think we've become so close to all the personal computers that we're carrying around. So if not stronger than the personal computers in a lot of underdeveloped countries. Like if you go to the underdeveloped countries, the mobile devices are way, way powerful than their outdated PCs that they might have. So I think mobile is still the most important device in the world. But I think just like innovations might have just flattened a little bit because the devices haven't been changing year over year. I think like looking back, I used to change my device every time a new. I still do. I still change my device every year just to make sure that I'm up to date. But when I look around, I still see a lot of iPhone 13s, 14s. So like that means they haven't changed their device in the past 2 to 3 years. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why we were also looking to find what's next, because we were lucky to be one of the successful companies in mobile because we were ahead of time back then. We were
Right.
on mobile before everyone else, and I think that's also one of the reasons why there's two different ways that we're currently looking at the market. One is the blockchain industry that we're looking. You briefly mentioned. We went into the blockchain industry around 2021 by purchasing shares in the third largest crypto exchange in Korea called Coin1. And we launched a layer 1 blockchain called XPLA. And we've invested into more than 30, 40 companies in the space. We're continuing to try to grow in that space. That's one of the ways that we looked at the market. The other way that we looked at the market was by growing in IP. So I think gaming is one of the most advanced formats of presenting an IP to the users. It not only introduces gameplay, but it also tells a story to the users too. But there are many ways to tell the story of the IP to the users. So TV, films, animations, like podcasts like this too. So we decided that we're going to start investing more into IP, and we wanted to learn how IP companies are built. So obviously, there's a huge IP company that almost everybody interacts with every day, called Disney. But on a smaller scale, I thought Skybound was very interesting, and that was one of the reasons why I invested to them. They were the creators of Walking Dead and Invincible, but and they started out as a comic book series, but eventually moved on to becoming one of the top TV shows in the world. Also becoming the #1 game for Scopely back in the day, too. So they, so we were thinking, we were a Korean company, a small Korean company servicing our games to 150 different countries around the world, and we became a global company. And if this happened to gaming before, Netflix, YouTube, Spotify is now enabling this for like TV, films, music, etc. So why don't we invest into Korean TV, film, animation, webtoon, music companies? Because they're all, it's going to be. We're now in the new generation where all of these IPs can grow significantly at an extremely fast pace. And all of these Korean assets look so undervalued to us. There's a huge lever called global that we wanted to
I see.
insert into. So that's another big expansion axis at our company too. So
Got it. Well, you jumped ahead of me a little on the importance of IP to you guys, and I think you mentioned why it's such a key part to secure these licenses for Com2Us for the future. For you, this is the future proofing of trying to be ahead in the same way that you were ahead in the mobile space. And I guess we'll go back to Summoner's War in a second, but since we're on the topic of of IP, I'd be curious how you're thinking about the importance of specifically Western IP. You talked about some of the Korean IP being undervalued, but Com2Us has a baseball title that's upcoming and will actually be releasing on PC. And I was curious, why baseball? What specific characteristics are you looking for in a Western IP? And how important is Western IP to the overall strategy versus, maybe IP in Korea?
So, as much as we love creating gaming, it's so hard to create successful games year over year and year, and it costs a lot of money to do that too. And so, when we had Summoner's War, when it became successful, all of our attention became focused on like how do we continue this
Mhm.
success with this game. And so we were adding more and more and more modes to the game. So we increased the meta significantly from the game compared to where it originally was. But you also face this dilemma of like, are we like throwing too much at the users, and like now we're setting a huge entry barrier to brand new users who are joining years later, because like there's so much that the other gamers have already built um, ahead of me. And why would I want to start investing into this game where I'm going to be doing catch up for the longest period of amount of time? So we had to think about like how we can make this type of um, IP or brand evergreen. And I
Mm.
think like if you crack that code, I think I think Major League Baseball is a great example. MLB has been around for more than 100 years, and so like I think you have to look at like how they've been doing it, so they have and there's a lot to learn from that. I think there's like 30 different teams, you're playing more than 150 games a year, you have a big all-star game in the middle, and then you have a World Series at the end. And um so I think there was a lot of things that we also tried to learn from 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 baseball. Like
Mhm.
baseball was one of my favorite sports growing up. I collected a lot of baseball cards, and I used to like translate a lot of Major League Baseball articles that were in English into Korean, and then I would post it on bulletin boards in Korean language back in the days when I was in high school and college. I remember, but anyways, I think there's so much to learn from Major League Baseball too. And like so for Summoners War, we also have an esports event. We have constant we have a tour of America where we travel all around America, city by city, and we make sure that the fans gather, and then that they get together and celebrate the game, and uh, and also get to meet the developers. We do that in Europe, Asia, also. We have an annual Summoners War Championship event that we've been running for, I think, past 6 years or so, too. And so, like, all of our efforts are into like how do we make games that are evergreen, and
Mhm.
we're also a public company. We have to show sustainable revenue, continuous growth. I think the best way to do that is by creating evergreen companies. And so Summoners War, we're trying to make that into an evergreen. Major League Baseball, already an evergreen IP,
IP.
and we had a baseball engine. And baseball
From the
is not
past
the
games.
yes, and baseball is not the easiest game to develop, in my thought, and there was a reason why back in the day when EA was doing every different type of sports annually, year
I
over
was about
year
to
over
say, I don't
year.
see any
Yes.
baseball titles.
So, and yeah, and 2K, there's not a lot of companies that are challenging them
Yeah.
because they built so much, and nobody's going to be able to copy their success within a year. So,
Yeah.
and we've been developing baseball games since 2002. So we have a baseball game engine that's almost like 24 years old. It's not the same engine,
Sure.
but but
Yeah.
I think we've created a huge entry barrier. I know there are a lot of other baseball games entering the market, but I think there's also a reason why our baseball game has always been doing better than the others too.
Yeah, I think that's interesting actually because so earlier this not this year but in 2024 I had the founder of Dream Game Studios and they're under the house of Dream which also houses like Dream 11, not Dream the mobile studio but the other Dream.
Mhm.
And they were building a lot of cricket titles and I think one of the things that
Right.
they were like didn't understand is no one in AAA, no EA, no 2K has tackled cricket. Cricket is one of the biggest, like most phenomenal sports in India, and it's also very popular in the US. And they basically are saying that, they misunderstand how to make a good cricket game because it's just not something that's part of the culture to some extent. And I thought that was really interesting because you're right. Like there is potentially a huge market opportunity if someone were to tackle it. But as you're mentioning, it's hard to make a baseball game. We could dig into the reasons for why, but perhaps that's probably too deep for today. But I was curious because it's also like I know that I've watched enough K dramas to know that baseball is also a very popular sport in Korea as well. So
Yes.
it's a Western IP, Western sport, but also very popular in Asia. And so I think that blends well, I think, with the approach of baseball being something that's not only a way for Com2Us to have a presence in the West, but also something that's going to be popular in the East.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think still like the Korean baseball we call it KBO. The KBO games are bigger in South Korea, and Japan has their
Mhm.
organization called the NPB. NPB games are bigger than MLB, but I think MLB is the only one that's cross borders and also has been
Mm.
penetrating significantly also to the Korean market and the Japanese market. So our MLB titles do extremely well globally. Um, one of them for one of them, their biggest market is the U.S. market, but for another, Japan is actually the biggest market
Mm.
globally. So it's very interesting to see like where your audiences are for every single game that you create, and you really understand the cultural differences
Yeah, yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually might take us into, you talked about, this one MLB game is bigger in the West, but this MLB game is bigger in Japan. And anchoring this also in the topic of, Summoner's War becoming a global title. Um, it's my understanding that you guys took a lot of different approaches to Summoner's War, in distinct markets, the West, in Korea, in Japan. Um, can you tell me about some of those different approaches and even using the MLB example? How did you treat
Mm.
Japan differently than how you treated the West?
Oh, so actually, there's a lot of companies who service their games differently in each of the market, like where their games would be separate builds.
Hmm.
But for us, we've always been a one build company. So
Mm,
so it's actually one build that's servicing globally. But we will do different type of local events on top.
hmm.
So we would celebrate like every national holiday differently in each of the markets.
Sure.
But yeah, it's always been one game. So I think like we yeah we I think it 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 requires a lot of effort to manage a lot of different builds, and I think like mobile. If you remember, maybe mobile teams' origins were always smaller, and to a certain degree,
Mhm.
and so we always kept it one build global distribution strategy, and that may be different. That's completely different from company to company, but we also think that a lot of our users talk with other people around the globe. So if you're on Reddit, for instance, you're not only getting the U.S. users, you might be getting users from Asia, and then they might be talking about like how come this this build gives this to us, and how come that build gives that to them.
Mhm.
So there's um and I think we wanted to minimize that as much as possible, but add as much local flavor as much possible too.
Mhm.
And that's where I think each of our regional branch offices um, really kicks in and then shows their power. So they will be managing their communities separately. They would be managing their top players separately. As I told you, we hold a lot of offline events, and they. I think communities are significantly important, especially when you're trying to maintain a franchise for more than a decade. And yeah, it's a lot of local people's effort on the ground. However, it's still one game.
Right. Okay. And this is obviously intergame, within the same build of an MLB game or within Summoner's War. And I discussed this question in an earlier episode on the Korean gaming market. But a big consumer difference that I've observed is a shift kind of towards casualization in the West. Cozy games, co-op, more collaborative and relaxing experiences. More just like this is a place that I hang out with my friends. I could just be standing there in Roblox doing nothing, and that's a gaming experience for a lot of what Gen Z would consider to be gaming. However, the East is known for its competitive and skill gaming culture. So, how has Com2Us thinking about this? Are you pursuing strategies to pounce on both trends? Are you observing casualization trends in the Korean gaming market as well? Or, in your mind, is it still very much the same, like hardcore esports, and it hasn't really caught that
Mm,
new gaming symptom that maybe the West is
mm,
moving towards?
yeah, yeah. So I think like now our company has grown to like more than thousands of employees.
Mhm.
So I think, and each of their studios have their own heads. And I think the studio heads really get to decide what type of game that they're going to develop and what type of approach that they are going to have.
Mhm.
Um, in general, I think like given that the majority of our developers are based in South Korea, I think we are still very good at creating more like intense hardcore type of games. However, our roots being in mobile, there are still a lot of casual driven teams within
Mhm.
the company. But but that's one of the things that I really find interesting. When you talk about the East and the West, I think the Eastern market, a lot of these Eastern developers, they focus on their own market first. And when they focus on their own market, meaning like if I'm a Korean developer, I'll focus on Korean market. If I'm a Chinese developer, I'll focus on a Chinese market. And if I'm a Japanese market, then I'll focus on the Japanese market. And when you focus on your own market, what happens is like if you want to hit a certain amount of revenue, that means you have to make so much more off of each user. So the average revenue per user becomes significantly higher where your daily active user uh, max is capped. So I think, and that means if you want to increase your average revenue per user, that means basically your meta becomes much more bigger than the game. And
Mhm.
so if the meta becomes much more bigger than the game, then it becomes hardcore. is what I think has happened. Whereas like if you're like a lot of the Western developers, or I think they look at the global market as their user base. So they won't develop a game that's focused on like 1-2 million people. I think a lot of the
Interesting.
developers focus on developing games that I want to make a game that's service to 10 million users. And so there's two different ways to make $100 million a year. Like you could service to 10 million users and only get $10 off of them, or
Yep.
you can service to 1 million users and get $100 off of each. I think a lot of the Eastern developers do the other way, and I think a lot of the Western developers tend to look at a broader user base.
Mm.
But I don't think any approach is any easier than the other, honestly. And I think what's most important is what type of game the producer wants to make, and what he's the most comfortable with, and where his ambitions lie. At the end of the day, I think like the founder of the company can't dictate that, and I think the the chief creative mind has to make that type of decision.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting observation. I mean, the math obviously working out that way, but I didn't necessarily think about the fact that, for a lot of Eastern studios, they're playing and they're basically trying to maximize what's in their smaller backyard. And then that meta game becomes the game itself to basically like stack on top versus going wide. And actually really interesting to think
But
about it for why
but you see more and more like studios graduating out of that,
out of that.
and
Yeah,
now so like now there's ton of unicorns coming out from South Korea,
sure,
from China, from Japan,
sure.
so like now a lot of them are playing in the global playground, for
Mhm,
so to
mhm.
speak, but I think their origins were in their backyard, as you mentioned.
Right, right. Okay, so and I want to shift to our last topic, which is investing and third party publishing. We spoke
Mm.
on the when we spoke on the phone. One of the things you mentioned that you're most excited about for 2025 for the company was third party publishing. And so what's upcoming and why are you excited about this?
I I think it like in an ideal world, I think every publisher would want to publish their games first party, but um there's a very like cyclical nature to this industry too, like where sometimes you have less cash, you have more developers available, so sometimes you have more cash, you have less developers available, and depending on those type of combinations, the company's strategies change, is the way that I look at it. And so I think it's important to see what's happening in South Korea. So I think a lot of big studios have become so big, and a lot of these the bigger studio problems are that their number one, two, three titles are making so much money, like they're making monies in the billions, that even a creative force within the company, when they try to make a game and the game is only making like $10 million a year, they would take it as a failure and they would kill those titles. So there's a lot of frustration also to the creative minds in the big companies. So a lot of them actually decide, you know what, I want to. I'm just going to leave the company, and then I'm going to start my own company, and I'm a name industry. It's easy for me to get funding, and so a lot of that is actually happening in South Korea. The way that I observe it during this particular time, so that's been happening because like. You can name all of the companies like NCSoft, Nexon, Krafton. These companies have been like giants for such a long time. And there's a lot of mature senior executives that are totally capable of running their own studios, and they want to make the next Nexon. They want to make the next Krafton. So I think it's become a very a great opportunistic playground for investors like us. There's not a lot of gaming VCs that look into the South Korean market, and it's also hard to know who's legit, who's good, like unless you're a person there. So, but I think Crit Ventures and Com2Us has been very successful recently in capturing these type of opportunities, and we're very excited to publish games that are coming out of these newly born studios. And I think that could fuel our company to go to our next step.
I see.
So.
Oh, it sounds like from your description, and I guess we were also going to talk about Crypt Ventures in a moment, that these two things are connected for you. The third-party publishing and the investment. So tell me a little bit about how Crypt Ventures ties into Com2Us Holdings.
Yes. So you mentioned about Crypt Ventures before, but it's some of it is not 100% correct, actually. So Crypt Ventures technically is not a CVC. It's a separate company. Our former CEO, Jason Song, who is actually the younger brother of James Song, our chairman, he decided to create Crypt Ventures a couple of years back, and so Com2Us is a shareholder of Crypt Ventures. However, Crypt Ventures is not a CVC. So Crypt Ventures is focused on doing investments in the gaming space to maximize its returns, and it doesn't have to align with Com2Us at all.
I see. Okay.
Sometimes coincidentally, it will align.
They align, yes.
But because if it's a great opportunity, I think both companies would review it, and maybe they would invest together. However, it is completely separate, and I am actually working for both companies. So there are ties, and so also the previous CEO becoming Crypt Ventures founder also is the tie that's existing. However, pretty much everybody else is separate.
Right.
So yes. So Com2Us. So when I was talking about those type of new founders coming out to create their own studios, I that was just a general observation on the South Korean market. I think that's also happening a lot in the West too. Like all of these companies are becoming so massive, and every time a company becomes big, there's the people on the top are very excited because they get to do a lot of more things with the resources that they have. But maybe there's not enough opportunities that go to the layer below, and those people always want to do something new. And I think that's where a lot of the Western VCs are also very focused on, and on investing into those type of founders who come out from big studios. So yeah, I think yes. So you were questioning about the relationship between Com2Us and Crypt Ventures. I think the common thing is that they get to see a lot of deals coming out from South Korea, and if a deal comes to me, I would send it to both. So they might be looking at both at the same time, but their evaluation process and their decision process is completely separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and apologies for, I mostly just threw in there the CVC word, but it basically suffice to say, Crypt Ventures does not invest off of Com2Us's balance sheet. We'll leave it there. And actually,
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead,
All right. We'll put a pin in it. And yeah, it's actually quite funny because I know that I met you actually through Jason.
Right.
And so,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I guess, what Crypt Ventures is, looking for, I know it's my understanding you guys have an $80 million game fund and a $16 million crypto fund. And you were speaking about blockchain earlier, about Com2Us, and I guess tangentially related, perhaps Crit Ventures is bullish on blockchain. And I guess I'd like to tap into a little bit of your perspective there about why you think that's a growth lever over the next decade. And is that a KR market thing only? Obviously, some of the administration changes in the U.S. potentially have put headwinds in the sales of the crypto community and blockchain community in the West. But why do you think that it's just such a next big thing, especially in this market?
Yeah. So, like, even our interview right now, we're doing all of this online. We're not doing this in person. And like during COVID, I think everybody experienced like being online. So, and I think like even for me, um, I think I do more Zoom calls than I do in-person meetings. So the amount of time that we are spending in the digital space is growing significantly. And I think um, what's going to happen in the future is people are going to value digital assets more than their physical assets, or just like they want to have a Birkin bag in their physical world, you might want a Bored Ape NFT in your digital life to show your social status. So I think like for Com2Us, because everything that we were doing was related to digital assets, it was almost a no-brainer for us to invest into blockchain. We firsthand experienced the change of free to play and how it impacted us. And I think we're thinking, oh, okay, free to play was not developed overnight. It took a very long time. It was building in-game economies with with digital assets is basically what we were doing. But those digital assets were not maybe able to be converted to physical assets. But now I think with blockchain, it enables that. So I think that it's the next evolution of free to play is the way that I look at it in a game designer's perspective. And also, like, as in a user's perspective, I feel like I'm spending more time in the digital space, so digital assets are going to become more important for it. And it doesn't make sense that like we're using money still the old way, So I think money's going to uh, be used in the new way too. And like I also like we're going back to Summoner's War. Like let's look at Summoners our whales in Summoner's War. Like if they've been a lot of these users spend like hundreds or thousands of dollars like a month, and then it becomes a year, then it's thousands to $10,000 a year. And if it's a decade, then they've been spending like hundreds of thousands easily on this game. And it doesn't make sense that these type of you're not able to do like character trading or account trading and all of that. Like the game was not designed that way. But in the future, like if you are servicing games uh for decades, that's a lot of like personal belongings that is tied into it. And there should be it should be tradable, or it should be. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of reasons why everything is pointing into that type of direction. And we're seeing a lot of these old illegal like account tradings happening too, across like many games too. But so um I I, th- I think it's a next step a in the game designer's perspective, in the gamer's perspective, in the day-to-day user perspective. I think it's just something that's going to come, and it really like my observation being in the blockchain space is that it really feels like back when I was in the feature phone game. So I feel like nothing was really organized back then, but I think a true app store moment will happen. And everybody will everything will start clicking is the way that we see it. It's just too early, and I think people are making a lot of like short-sighted comments, just looking at a fraction of the big picture.
Hmm. Well, I'll have you know that I actually began
Uh-huh.
at Navic as our crypto show host segment. So I used to run the crypto segment. So I had people from Animoca brands and across the Web3 space. And I think I always found myself very academically curious about the blockchain space. And so it sounds like for you guys, it's very much around digital asset ownership versus, necessarily the power of decentralization. Not that you didn't say that, but it sounds like for you guys, you're more on the digital asset ownership side. And so it's interesting to think about, how you're thinking about it. And maybe, that will have its watershed moment and time will tell. And we're eagerly awaiting it. But we're heading up on the last couple of minutes of our show today. And I wanted to ask you a couple conclusionary questions. Mostly around what's happening in the Korean gaming market and the challenges that are being faced today. So you may have mentioned this specifically already, but I'd be curious in Korea specifically, what do you think in the Korean gaming market specifically? What do you think is being undervalued right now?
Um, the the amount of great talent that they have,
Hmm.
I think the Korean gaming industry has so much great talent. Like a lot of companies may think Come2Us is big, but we're merely like the seventh largest gaming company in South Korea. So in terms of revenue, so there's so many unicorns in Korea, and if you think about like how like and we're a couple thousand people, like and the other companies are bigger than us. So I think there's a vast amount of talent
Hmm.
that are in Korea. And I think the Koreans are also starting to change their perspective, as you mentioned, as I mentioned before. Not focusing only in their backyard. I think they're looking at the global market, truly. And so not only are they making mobile games for South Korea, now they're creating like console PC games for the global market. So like I think there's a lot of success stories that have started coming out, and I think that's also a reason why you're starting to focus on Asian developers too. So because it's not only the Western titles created by the Western developers that our users are enjoying these days, and now I think the world has become much more flat, and our users are enjoying titles from all over the world. So I think it's a great opportunity right now for the Korean founders that are trying to go global.
Awesome. Okay. And now the counter corollary to that, what's the
Uh,
biggest challenge that Korean gaming companies are facing today?
they're not looking global enough, and so I think it takes time. So like sometimes I see myself saying the same thing that I said 10 years ago to our developers back in Korea. So, uh, I think a lot of them have to really feel the difference. I think now that a lot of the Koreans have established global studios, I think as their producers and developers, they get to live abroad more and also feel the cultural difference. I think the games are also naturally going to become more and more international. And I just feel like it just takes time. You can't force it overnight. The cultural things really take time, and game is a big part of culture. The next generation, it is the center of the next generation culture. So I think it's going to take time, but there's tremendous amount of talent in South Korea, and I think more and more users around the world will be enjoying games created from them.
All right. And the last question, what does Come2Us need to execute on this year? And what makes you feel confident that it's going to happen?
So my biggest agenda is we have our Major League Baseball game that was mobile for the past 20 years. Finally, it's on Steam. It was released during the off season last year, but it's our first beginning of the season launch. So I'm extremely excited for that. We also are expanding our baseball game into the Japanese market. We're creating an MPV version of our mobile game, so really excited for that too. Our Summoner's War franchise continues to expand. We just released a title called Summoner's War Rush. It's soft launched in several countries, and now we're gonna do a global push for that. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of third-party titles that we are extremely bullish about. So I think like we have a lot of good things aligned up for this year, and I really hope it's our time to jump to the next level again.
Awesome. Well, honestly, what a fantastic note to end on. This was such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the Com2Us, the rich Com2Us history, your history at the company, and how you guys are thinking about the future of the gaming industry. And that's, I think, the top of our episode. So as always, for my audience, if you have feedback or ideas, hit me up at alexandra@navic.co. I'm always open. And with that, that's our episode. Kyu, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@navic.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Navic has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.navic.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Navic Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.navic.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.